All right, we had a good chat today in the state capitol. I had the chance to visit with Governor Parson, Mayor Lyda Crewson of St. Louis, Brian Treese of Columbia, and Ken McClure of Springfield. This, I believe, is about the fourth of our chats right now, and the goal was a really simple one, which was this. How do we come up with concrete steps to take action against gun violence in Kansas City, St. Louis, and throughout the state of Missouri? What we got tired of hearing over the years was people just saying, well, it's too big a problem, or saying that there are 30 different solutions. We understand that there are a lot of issues that affect violent crime, from poverty to education, workforce, etc. But Missourians are getting tired of us just kicking the can down the road. And so we started these meetings with a goal of let's take concrete and decisive action in our cities. And today we have 3 different items that allow us to do that. First step relates to witness protection and witness relocation. Currently in Missouri, we do not have enough funds to help police, frankly, solve crimes. Then you have folks that are scared to say things. You've heard of the stop snitching idea, that sort of thing. We're trying to tell people that if you talk to the police about offenses, if you reach out to prosecutors and others, you'll be safe. And we're going to make sure we have enough funding for that. We estimated that just to address those issues in our cities would be about $518,000 a year more. If you double that for the state of Missouri, that gets you to about $1 million. The Missouri budget, by the way, is $6 billion. So us saying that we need $1 million to help try to make a difference in Kansas City, St. Louis, and all of our cities is key and important. So that's step 1. Step 2 relates to a triage center. And what I mean by that is this. In Kansas City, every night we have lots of folks that are arrested, but largely because we want somewhere for them to sleep at night, to be safe. There are folks that sometimes are dealing with emotional distress, drug abuse, addiction. And so they often rely on resources like the jail, or resources like Truman Medical Centers, or resources like hospital emergency rooms. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of people in our community that shouldn't be in the ER, they shouldn't be in jail, and what we need are these types of assessment treatment centers that allow you to look at those who are dealing with mental health trauma, with substance abuse, allow them to find a way to come up with solutions for those concerns, but then ultimately to allow them to actually not have to be in the justice system, to not be in the ER system, both of which are much more expensive than actually giving somebody counseling that they need long term. So that's item 2. The governor's been very supportive of that, and we'll look for more funding from that in our next budget. And then the final thing is actually something that I think is exciting, transformative, important, and shows, I think, what the moment is now. I got a chance to visit with a Republican governor in this great state in his office today, and we talked about responsible gun reform. And that responsible gun reform is the type of gun reform you've seen in Kansas City in large part already. Banning the possession of firearms for domestic violence abusers, which just makes sense. And we heard the governor say that today too. Nobody thinks that a domestic abuser, someone who's been a threat to their intimate partner, should be someone who's still carrying firearms, who's still a threat to their partner and to their community. So that's one important step. Another important step that we're looking for is a statewide ban on possession of handguns, particularly concealed firearms by minors. If you're under the age of 18 years old, already in federal law, they say you're not supposed to be carrying guns. There's a gap in Missouri which has led to under-enforcement. It's led to 16-year-olds carrying concealed weapons, and sometimes our police officers wondering what you can do with them, or coming up with legislative workarounds. And what I heard today from police chiefs in St. Louis, throughout the state, etc., was saying that we want to make sure that we're closing those loopholes, and we're making sure that we know that domestic abusers, that minors, will not be possessing firearms. So we asked the governor today, the mayors did, for state legislative action to make that a statewide priority. He said he'll consider it, and so that's something that we're excited about as well. And then a final perspective is this. Felons are currently under federal law, and this is actually prosecuted often, are banned from possessing firearms. The challenge is there are a lot of people that commit crimes that are like felonies. We get plea deals to misdemeanors for any number of reasons in the criminal justice system. What we want to do is close the loophole where somebody who, let's say, is convicted of spousal abuse, but it's pleaded down to a misdemeanor, is still allowed to walk around with a firearm every day. So what we're asking the governor to do is to ban the possession of firearms for all those who have been repeat violent offenders. And so when we talk about gun reform, responsible gun reform, this is what we're talking about. It's nothing crazy. It's not taking things out of law-abiding citizens' hands. But what we're saying is let's give police officers throughout the state of Missouri the opportunity to have tools, to take guns out of the hands of domestic abusers, to take guns out of the hands of minors who aren't supposed to have them, and to take guns out of the hands of repeated violent offenders. Those steps with our witness relocation protections, that step with mental health treatment that's actually targeted towards those who are using the system the most and need to avoid those challenges, are key concrete steps we're taking. And I'll say this. What we had in the room were a bunch of Republicans, Democrats, law enforcement folks, city people, country people. All of us realize that this is a problem that we can't handle anymore. And it's a problem that we need to make sure we're addressing and that we're taking concrete steps. We're past the time of talking. We're past the time of just saying there's a problem. We're past the time of just howling at the moon and saying, Jeff City, change something. What we're saying now is in our cities, we're going to take concrete action. And I'm proud of the mayors. I'm proud of Kansas City for being on the forefront of this. And I'm proud of the governor, frankly, for working across the aisle today to make sure we could take those steps. So any questions for you?
How realistic do you think it is that we see gun reform, regardless of what it is? You tossed out a couple different options there.
Sure. I think it is actually a very realistic thing. Step one, we need to make sure that the state does not preempt the work that we've done already. In Kansas City, I think we've taken key steps. I'm proud of the fact that our gun reform legislation in Kansas City has been adopted in St. Joseph, Missouri. It's been adopted in Independence. And I learned today that a bill's been filed in the St. Louis Board of Aldermen to adopt it. Hundreds of thousands of Missourians, have an opportunity to be safer based on what we're doing, and we want to make sure that that's an opportunity for millions. And I think the question I would ask for anybody who's questioning this is, who thinks a domestic abuser should be able to carry a firearm right after they get out of jail? Who thinks that a 14-year-old should be walking around getting into a life of carrying a firearm all the time without parental consent, unrelated to hunting and unrelated to anything valuable in our cities? And so I am positive, and I understand it's an election year. Well, the question I would ask people is, do you want your community to be safe? You know, what I hear from everybody I talk to, Republicans in the state legislature, people all around our state, people in the business community and beyond, say they think it's an important issue that this community be safer, that our state be safer. It is an embarrassment right now that in Missouri we have three of the most dangerous cities in the country. Three. Not just Kansas City and St. Louis, but also Springfield. We shouldn't be on that list. I've visited a lot of states over time. They don't boast that sort of number. And so I think it's very realistic. I'm heartened by the fact that the governor today said that it's something that's realistic. And, you know, that's a man who's spent a career in law enforcement. He's from rural Missouri, and I think he recognizes the challenge that we have. So I commend him for that. And I think before the legislative session, we'll see a bill likely filed to that effect. I look forward to hearing in the State of the State a speech from the governor about the steps we're taking, and I do think it's realistic, and because we're tired of it, right? We have a job to do, and our job is to make people safer. We're going to make sure we do it.
Just going big picture for a second about violent crime in general, when you talk to people out on the streets, one thing that I hear all the time is people say, you know, they say there's going to be change, but
Sure.
you know, violence crime is going up instead of down, particularly
Sure.
the homicide numbers. Why should people believe that, okay, now there is going to be change, whether it happens at the local level or state level?
Well, step one, I don't care what the heck happened in the decades before I was in this office. I'm 35 years old, so a lot of bad things happened before I was even alive. What that doesn't mean is that I'm going to actually just stand by and say, oh, well, nothing can happen, right? I mean, look, I understand pessimism. I'm from here. I've looked at the same stubborn number of homicides for the most part my entire life. But I think we're committed to making a difference. What you have never seen before is the mayors from across the state getting together to talk about something that isn't economic development, that isn't fun, that's tough. It is a tough issue. We spent a lot of time out of our cities, right, making sure we're working together on this. And what we also haven't seen is the governor of Missouri make this opportunity for a forum for all of us. So, you know, I think what you can say is look at the people who are trying to make the change. We're taking real concrete steps to make a difference. And then the other thing I'll say is places do change. You know, 25 years ago, 27 years ago, New York City had in excess of 2,000 homicides. Last year, I think they had about 248. That's pretty close to the number of homicides in the city of St. Louis last year, by the way. And by the way, there are 8 million people in New York City. There are 315,000 in St. Louis. And so I think if you're really a realist, you know that things can change. You know that things can happen, and you know we're not bound by the way things exist today. And what I'm saying to everyone in our community, those who are looking for a safer community, and frankly for those who are offenders, we are not giving up our fight, and we are going to make sure this community is safer. And frankly, I'm not going to leave this position without making sure it is.
And then both St. Louis and Kansas City are obviously major border towns. How much of this has to be a regional solution as opposed to, hey, Missouri, we're changing stuff, but Illinois...
Well, you know, here's the thing, right? I mean, we understand that borders don't shut things off at all. A little life background of mine, I used to teach in prisons in Kansas, right? The maximum security prison in Kansas was a place where I taught classes. Half the offenders are from Kansas City, Missouri. It was like, hey, you're my neighbor. We understand there are no lines, but we also understand we need to do our job, right? You know, it does me no good to go talk to the mayor of Topeka or Kansas City, Kansas, or anywhere else if I'm not making sure we're addressing issues here right now. You know, right now our law enforcement have outstanding relationships across the state line. I have every reason to believe that's the issue in St. Louis as well, that they do the same. And we're going to make sure that we're stopping people who shouldn't have firearms. We're going to make sure that people know you can't get away with random gunplay here. And we're going to know that we're enforcing here in Kansas City, Missouri. And I think that'll be an impact for our entire region. So that's something I'm proud of. We're going to keep fighting that. And I work well. I know the U.S. Attorney in the District of Kansas, so we'll talk to them a lot. Talked to the District Attorney in Wyandotte County just the other day. We'll keep working together to make sure we're coming up with long-term solutions. All good?
Does it make you hesitant when the mayor's response about gun, or the governor's response about gun control is that he'll consider it and it's not a more concrete
No.
answer?
You know, I mean, on the question of am I concerned if the governor's response is he'll consider it, maybe I've just been around too long. You know, I think 4 years ago, you might not have seen a governor of his position who's up for re-election a year from now actually say he'll consider it. And I think if you look even deeper at his quotes, where he's saying nobody who's committed an offense of domestic violence should be walking around with a firearm, I think that's pretty clear to me that says that, yeah, you know, maybe it'll be tough getting through the legislature, but I think he recognizes that it's the right thing to do. And I think what we're seeing more people across the partisan divide say is that we see that there are right things to do. And if we can save a life, right, particularly when the statistics show that folks who've committed these offenses are far more likely to murder their partners, then I think that's something, no matter you're a Republican, a Democrat, if you're from the Boot Heel, or if you're from, you know, Brookside, everybody gets that. And I think the governor understands that. I look forward to sharing that message with the state legislature over the months ahead. All right, thank you.